This week, it's time for Security Money. The Security Weekly 25 Index is finally starting to rebound. In the Leadership and Communications segment, SolarWinds is a game changer. You cannot sugarcoat cybersecurity. Rethinking CISO accountability, a call for balance in cybersecurity leadership. How to improve communication in the workplace, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
Broadcasting live, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. If your organization is ready to embrace edge computing, we have good news. The 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report provides everything you need to know to get started. In the report, we identify the common characteristics of edge computing. We found edge use cases are rapidly coming online, and we reveal how to secure edge computing. Most importantly, you'll learn how to prepare for your edge ecosystem. Get your complimentary copy of the report today by visiting securityweekly.com/ATT Cybersecurity. That's securityweekly.com/ATT Cybersecurity. 270. That's the average number of times a company comes under cyber attack each year. And the average cost of a successful data breach is $4.35 million. Cygnus ensures your internal and external teams are securely connected, confident, in control, and compliant during a cyber crisis. Visit securityweekly.com/Cygnus to learn more. That's CYGNVS. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 327, recorded November 6, 2023. I am your host, Matt Alderman, back in the home studio after being in studio last week. It was so awesome to be there with Jason. Joining me remotely this week are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Ben Carr. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, Matt, rubbing it in that you were up in studio last week, but excited to be here with you today and talk about all things It looks like there's some interesting stuff going on with SolarWinds. Maybe, I mean, somebody's heard about that. I think it's affected everybody. So, yeah, excited to talk about that stuff today.
Yeah, it's going to be, the second segment's going to be some very interesting stuff around SolarWinds. Jason's out this week, so stepping in, Mr. Tyler Robinson. Always a pleasure to have you, Tyler.
Good to see you, Matt. Glad you got some studio time. Definitely a little envious, but hey, I'm glad you got some.
Just a little bit. I'm going to try to get some more before the end of the year, too. Join our Discord channel to chat with our hosts, ask questions, customize live stream alerts, and more. Visit securityweekly.com/Discord to receive an invite. All right. It's my quarterly show. It's a little early in the quarter, but it's okay. Most of the earnings reports, there were a bunch of earning reports that came in on Thursday last week. So I have pretty up-to-date data for this quarter. A couple interesting things to note before we kind of dig into the numbers. I don't know what's going to happen next year with the Security Weekly 25 Index. There are barely 25 public companies. Splunk was acquired by Cisco. It's still in the index until the merger or till the acquisition's finalized. But when Splunk comes out, I don't know that I have 25 companies left, gentlemen.
That says a lot to where we're at in the industry as well, right? Like this has gone in a much different direction than I would have predicted.
Agreed. When I created the index in 2018, I went back into 2017 data to go back and collect data on. And I thought for sure we would continue to see IPOs, we could continue to see growth. What I didn't anticipate was all the public companies that would turn around and get bought back up by private firms. We've had multiple exits from private equity firms taking public companies out of the public market. And we've had a couple really interesting acquisitions. The Splunk Cisco deal, this thing's big, right? I mean, this is a huge acquisition. And so, yeah, with you, Tyler, like I thought we'd just have a ton of companies to pick from because the IPOs would keep on coming, but they're not.
Yeah, it's going to be
Yeah,
we're down to 25. How do we, what's our next iteration of this? We don't do public. We now do speculation. We do speculative. We do startups. Like, I don't even know where to go from there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting on the startup side to see how much investment happens over the next several quarters in the startup side. I mean, everything I'm hearing says that there's a lot of dry powder out there that's kind of waiting for something to break loose. And so, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens in Q1 and Q2 of next quarter, and will the emergence of that money kind of start changing things from a market dynamic perspective? I don't know.
Yeah, Ben, I hear the same thing, right? With the investment dollars out there, there's a lot of dry powder. The problem is the public markets really aren't in a position for exits, and that's the biggest challenge from an IPO because all these investors, the only way they get their money out is a sale or IPO. Now, I was talking to a private equity firm a couple of weeks ago, and they're like, "We prefer sale because we get all of our money at the close of the sale. Where if you go IPO, that money trickles out over time. You don't get it all in one big bang. And so I think we might see a lot more acquisitions than we will see IPOs, but it'll be interesting to see, though. All right, let's get into some of the numbers. So at the close on the 3rd of November, which was Friday, the Security Weekly 25 Index closed at 1,614. That is up from last quarter. It's a current return of 61.4% over the roughly 4 years I've been running that index. So it's still not a bad return. But the NASDAQ sitting at 13,478.28. That's up 103%. So you can see the NASDAQ is still outperforming the Security Weekly 25 Index in comparison. But the NASDAQ slightly down. So last quarter, I talked about this really interesting divergence between the index and the NASDAQ, where the NASDAQ was recovering faster. The NASDAQ actually backtracked this last quarter. And so the gap between the NASDAQ and the Security Weekly 25 Index has actually shrunk. And you'll see that in the graphs. If anybody goes and looks at the show notes, you'll see that in the graphics as well. So definitely the NASDAQ's pulled back, which was a little interesting.
Which is interesting numbers just because of how much is now public and what's IPO'd and what's not there. So I imagine those numbers are going to diverge to a pretty symbiotic relationship eventually here.
They were very symbiotic. Like they would track each other almost the same. And then we saw this really interesting divergence last quarter, and now they're starting to come back together. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Real early in the year, though, too, right?
Oh yeah. Well, this market is still fickle, right? I don't think we're out of the woods yet. Like everybody thinks like we're done. We're not done. The consumer's still spending. Remember when we interviewed Herjavec last October? He said the consumer had to feel the pain before the market would bottom. The consumer's not there yet. So I still think we have 2 to 3 quarters potentially of this kind of up and down market condition.
Yep. I think right after holidays, we'll begin to see some of that consumer pain and or buckle down on spending. Maybe even right before the holidays, we'll see. But the fourth quarter is always an interesting one.
The interesting to look at will be what is consumer spending after the holidays, right? Like that'll really be kind of the bellwether, I think, of where we're going for 24. If spending is off, right? If that number is way down, which it very well could be, then I think that doesn't lead to a lot of positivity, especially ahead of the election.
Right. Agreed. Yeah, because that's the other wrench next year. Like I could see the second half actually being pretty decent if we kind of bottom out around the holidays and be on track as we head into Q3, Q4. But then the elections will throw a wrench into everything. So who knows what's going to happen? We'll see. Let's look at Q2 results. Revenue beat by a little over 1%. That's down from last quarter. So every quarter I go pull the earnings reports for everybody in the index, and I compare them on average, like what was expected, what was the beat, It's only 1.4%, so it's really interesting that there's not a. It's usually a bigger number than that. The profit beat was 15.89% on average, which is also down from last quarter. So you're seeing that the expectations of the analysts and how numbers are coming in are much more aligned. There's not as many surprises because both of these numbers have been trending down over the last couple quarters. So just some interesting trend metrics. Best performing Zscaler, Sentinel-1, and Leidos last quarter. Worst performing OneSpan, Verint, and Varonis.
Not surprising, actually. Those are definitely some that I would expect to perform very well, and some that are gonna have to make some pivots eventually.
Yes. Zscaler has performed pretty well as a company through the last couple of years. So yes, but then you look at a couple of those other companies on the worst performing list, and you're like, yeah. OneSpan I think was a SPAC, and SPACs have had a lot of issues lately. We'll get to that in a second, but anybody that came out as a SPAC is not performing at the level that companies that came out in a traditional IPO have. That's for sure. All right, let's see. Acquisition Splunk by Cisco. That's a big number. It's in multi-billion. It was 28 billion or something like that, I think was the valuation on that one. It's a pretty big acquisition.
I mean, that may be one of the biggest spends that many companies have is their damn Splunk bill. So not surprising it was a large number, but that is a massive number.
I know. Yes, it's a massive number. And Splunk, right before the acquisition, Splunk actually put up some good numbers that quarter right before. And so they announced right before Cisco bought them, and they crushed expectations, which probably only drove that valuation even higher. So timing was perfect actually for them.
Yeah, probably also a good thing for Cisco to diversify in a few areas as well. Their stuff's getting so complicated. I don't even know what I'm buying from Cisco anymore.
That's true, actually. This could actually consolidate the portfolio a little bit. Like just throw everything into Splunk, call it a day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of competitors out there trying to play that market, though, right? Play the reduction in the Splunk spending market. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that plays out long term, whether they keep the customer base they have or whether they're going to see a reduction in that because of that spend.
Oh yeah, agreed, Ben. You see Graylog, LogPoint, Logarithms trying to get back into this market. Yeah, there's some players, and then you have the data lake players like Snowflake and others that are also trying to put security data into their data lake. So yes, there is competition all abound for those security controls into big data stores for sure. All right, couple highlights. IronNet bankrupt. We've been tracking them for the last 2-3 quarters. We knew they were in trouble. Bye-bye. Sentinel-1 looking for a sale. There were sale rumors out there. There were some really interesting news articles around Sentinel-1 and some of the companies that were looking to, like Wiz was looking to potentially acquire Sentinel-1, but then news got out and it kind of blew up the deal. So Sentinel-1 on the sale blocks, that could be another one that exits the public market.
That would be an interesting one.
That rumor's been out there.
They're doing pretty well,
there
right?
For a while
why?
That, right?
Yeah. To both of your points, that news has been out there for a while, and it would be really interesting to see what a Sentinel-1 Wiz looks like, because Wiz really good on the cloud side. And then you pull in the endpoint data from Sentinel-1. I don't know. It might be a really interesting pair up.
Sounds like an O365 contender, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe. Look, Microsoft's still crushing it, guys. Like the E5 license is still creating a lot of havoc. I mean, there's been news articles about this. Look, any endpoint player in this market is susceptible to an E5. No doubts about it.
And I think Microsoft is still looking to make moves in that sector, right? They're still looking to acquire, I believe. At least that's what I'm hearing, and that's kind of the belief of the street out there, right? If they kind of put more into that E5 license and get even more traction there. Yeah, I mean, the E5 is really, if you're a CIO or a CISO and you're trying to compete on a financial side against an E5 license that you potentially already own, or that upgrade from E3 to an E5, it's pretty compelling because they do a decent job, right? It's not perfect, but then you have to consider. Am I trying to get the 80, 90%, or am I trying to get 95, 100%? What's the delta payoff for that? It's a compelling argument, and a lot of people are going down that road.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see. A couple really interesting debt rounds by public companies. So Akamai raised a little over $1 billion via debt. It's a little surprising to me. You're in the public market. You got a cash infusion when you went IPO to raise a debt round. Rapid7 did the same thing, $260 million debt round via convertible note. So companies might be a little tight in the public market, so they're raising some money to be able to continue to grow and thrive. It's always interesting when a public company raises debt to me. It's like, okay, what's going on under the covers? Rapid7 did also do a layoff of about 470 people, as well as SecureWorks laid off about 300. So, definitely some movement in some of these public companies of getting their costs under control.
Yeah, I wonder if some of that is making sure they have that capital in case there are opportunities and they've got that all secured and ready to go with potential harder times coming. Maybe they're reading that differently. If they're capable of doing that from a reputation standpoint and not spooking the market or the shareholders or board too much, then I think that's not a bad move, just to make sure you've got that capital to play with.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I mean, remember, there were some rumors around Rapid7 potentially being for sale as well. So by raising the debt round, that gives them a little more runway probably, so they don't have to be sold.
And I think there are people probably that entire market, right? Rapid7, Qualys, right? There are people who are trying to look at that market as a potential point of expansion.
Yeah, right. It's a logical place to go. Let's switch over to the private side. Still good rounds, by the way. Like, there's still money flowing into companies. There's still some really good rounds. I mean, Cato Networks, $238 million, OneTrust, 150, SpyCloud, 110, Drago, 74. Like, there's still money flowing in, Ben, to these private companies. They're later rounds, obviously. So VCs are still pushing money into some of these startups.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I mean, there is money that's going. It's not just, people aren't just waiting on it. We saw the acquisition or intent to acquire, right, of Palo and Talent. So, I mean, things are definitely happening in the market. It's just, again, I think people are getting better deals for the money they're investing right now than they were, a year, 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah, and some really interesting, the Talent acquisition was interesting. The Perimeter 81 acquisition by Checkpoint, that was a $490 million. And Perimeter 81, they weren't that old. Like, that's a pretty good valuation for that company. That's a nice size exit.
But to get a lot of this money out, right? Like, these VCs are really having to think and work hard, because you have to sell in order to get that money back out, especially at those numbers at a large company like that. And that is a longer game than I think a lot of people think it is.
Oh, yeah. Some companies 15 plus years and counting, baby.
Well, yeah, but it's interesting. There are also people that are getting acquired on the early side too, right? It's not just the long-term play. Like, we're seeing, I think, both of those things happen. I think generally it is taking longer. There's further rounds that have to happen, but we're seeing some people get snatched up fairly quickly relatively to
and some of the
investment spend at the time that they've been up.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ben. I think there are some companies that have some really interesting capabilities that are really easy little tuck-ins that allow you to kind of fit those acquisitions in. You see them on this list that I produce. OORT, OORT. They weren't that big. SCADA Fence, I don't think was that big either. Some of these are smaller companies that just got snapped up, the other big one was the Bionic acquisition by CrowdStrike. That was $350 million. So there's some good size acquisition exits in here, for sure.
Yeah. Arctic Wolf bought, Revelstoke, and they hadn't been around for that long, right? That was a fairly younger play, I think, from the company side. So, I mean, it does happen out there. It's just what's the trajectory? And is it a tuck-in or is it something more strategic?
Yeah, agreed. The only layoff I saw in Q3 on the private side was HackerOne laid off about 12% of its staff. That was the big one I saw on that side. Process Unity and CyberGRX merge. That's an interesting one. It was considered a merger, not an acquisition. I think Process Unity took the lead, but I'm not sure. Just saying.
Yeah, I believe that's correct, actually. Yeah. But they're kind of going to market as kind of both names, right? They're not coming under one. It's kind of a joint go to market, I think, but for at least what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I noticed that as well, because when I looked it up, it was weird to see CyberGRX on the Process Unity page, but still having its own name. So yeah, it looks like they're both going to market with their names.
Yeah. Interesting.
So I don't know what happened to, like, is Fred still there? Like, I don't know. How
as far as I know, Fred is still there. Yeah. He's still there as far as I know.
Got it. Yeah, I used to do some consulting work for Fred Knipe and the team at CyberGRX when I was in Colorado, because they were right there, headquartered right downtown Denver. So, I mean, I know that team pretty well. I was just curious, like, what did that mean for Fred and the rest of the team? But it sounds like they're all still there.
Yeah.
I also tracked a death on the private side. Now, normally we don't know when a private company goes under. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Blue Lava was one of those that we know went under in Q3. Ceased operations. Usually we see like an asset sale or maybe an acquisition without a price to it because it might have been a fire sale. It's very rare that we see a private company just stop operations and go out of business. It doesn't happen very often, but Blue Lava was definitely one we saw last quarter, which was a very interesting one.
I haven't even heard of them. What did they do?
I think it was a GRC player.
Obviously, their marketing team needed some help.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. The CEO I know personally. I haven't talked to him, so I don't know exactly what happened. But yeah, it was definitely, they were trying to get bought, but I think they couldn't get a deal done, and they just ceased operations. So kind of sad to see that happen in this market, because I love the space, I love the startup world. So when you see one go under and not have an exit path, it's a little like, oof, that one hurt.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, I mean, it was announced as an acquisition, right? So Zeiston supposedly acquired them, but terms weren't announced, and I had more of that sense too.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big news in the quarter, right? I mean, that's kind of a quick summary of all that. Anybody who's interested to see how it's trending, obviously go check the charts in the show notes. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.